I was completely in the dark. I had no idea what they were doing and how did all those guys in the band ornament all those arrangements, chords, and what were they doing, and I had no idea. And so this music teacher I mentioned before in high school really helped me with that. And it would take me a long time to describe, to answer that fully, but let's put it this way. You, as a student, have to develop an opinion about chords and scales the way that a chef has an opinion about salt and pepper. And that the two obvious things that we see on the kitchen table all the time, salt and pepper. One tastes this way, one tastes that way. You can add sugar to the mix and you go, well, I know what sugar is and I know what salt is. They're completely different. So in music, you could probably find an analogy like that. Like there's major and there's minor. Major usually represents happy, minor usually represents sad. But then after those sort of really big generalizations, there's all these subtleties. And that's where a spice rack that's got 100 spices for the cook is very much like what a musician has to learn how to do. So you have to learn what they sound like, but more importantly, you have to develop an opinion about it. So that if you're writing a song about a little girl who drops her ice cream cone and her dog goes to lick it up and gets run over by a truck or something like that, you know, this long story, and you're going, well, you know, and then there's somebody watching from the other side who's a little deranged and he starts laughing, you know, and you're thinking, well, this is complex, it's sad, there's the, you know, there's the comedy of this, you know, the ice cream going on the floor and the dog licking up, but then there's the tragedy of the dog getting crushed by the wheel, and then there's this crazy person laughing hysterically at the whole thing. And you go, well, how do I represent that? You know, if you were a lyricist, it'd be tough too. But as a musician, if you were just trying to write a song about it, an instrumental song, or you were scoring a movie, that's complex. So what scale do you use for which part of that little scene? At some point, when the dog gets run over, you're probably not going to use the major chord. You're going to look for something that's going to make people in the audience feel shock and tragedy at this thing. So what is that? And you would have to look into yourself, to your spice rack, and say, which one is it? Which scale is it? Which combination of chord and scale is going to resonate this sort of shock and horror at this thing that they're watching? And so how do you do that? So the way you do that is you start with the major scale and all the modes that are built off of this. So it's got 7 notes in it, and if you start that scale on the second note and end on the octave of the second note, that's simply a different mode of that scale. And we have names for each one of those situations, whether you're starting on the first, the third, or the fourth, or the fifth, whatever. Funny names. Names don't mean anything but Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian. The thing that you have to understand, though, is that the audience hears that. When you're looking at it theoretically on paper, you may say to yourself, well, if it's all a major scale, what's the difference? But the audience actually doesn't know that it's a mode. They are going to relate every high note to the lowest note. And in modern music, basically, whatever the bass line is presenting as the key for that moment, every other note is seen in relationship to that bass note. And that's how you create tension, resolution, happiness, sadness, introspection, hope, you know, all of those things. But you have to sing those scales, you have to practice them against that note that the audience is going to hear, and you've got to develop an opinion about it. And the reason why I say develop an opinion is because that is going to be your style. That's your set of opinions about when to use a scale, which is part of your original question, is actually your style. Because you'll find out very often in musical situations that there are no rules. There's only cause and effect. Very often there are a couple of notes that are up for grabs in every given rhythmic situation, where you can write a melody, embellish a rhythm phrase, or create a solo. It's not always spelled out for you. So whatever you do is based on these years of you building up opinions about how to send a message to the audience, how you want them to feel.
Great answer.
Long answer, I know, isn't it?
That's a great answer.